That's right. Back at it again, Full Custom Hot Dog here, doing another Blu-ray review. That's right. And today we're going to be talking about the 1991 film Body Parts, released by Scream Factory. Ooh. Directed by Eric Red, which of course we'll talk about the details of the film later. But first, let's get through what's on this disc. We've got an audio commentary, a new audio commentary with director, co-writer Eric Red. A lot of interesting backstory about this film, which we'll touch on, because it's based on a novel that's by now several years old, and it was in development for quite a long time. But he also talks about some of the things he wanted to do, what he hoped to achieve. This is also an early film of his. He doesn't do too much directing these days, but he does a lot of writing, it looks like. I think he said he was 20-something, like around 25 when he directed Body Parts. We've also got new interviews with Eric, the director, actor Paul Ben-Victor, who plays the convict, which we'll talk about, I suppose. You see, our main character is a criminal psychologist, so Paul Ben-Victor plays a criminal that Jay Fahey's character is psychologistizing. And we've also got an interview with the editor, Anthony Redman. And there's also deleted scenes with optional director's commentary. Nothing too crazy here. They kind of removed some things that I would have liked. If you don't know what this is about, it's a film where people have body parts grafted onto them, implanted, I suppose, surgically attached, because they're missing body parts. It's not bonus parts. And those body parts seem to have sentience of some sort, a potentially evil sentience. And they cut out scenes that show the hand kind of moving on its own and stuff, which one would have already given you a hint that, hey, this ain't no normal hand, and two, a little bit more body horror-ish. So I love my body horror, and I would have very much appreciated that in the film. Then of course you get the theatrical trailer. So all in all, it's a pretty solid disc. Surprised it's not a collector's edition release. It's just one of their normal releases. But it's surprising given the amount of extras and new extras. So it's a solid release all around. I'm going to have to give this I don't think it's a new scan. It didn't look too new. So I'm going to have to at least give it an A-. I know. Maybe that's a little high, but I love my commentaries. They've told me what I feel like is everything that I need to know about the film Body Parts. But let's get into the film itself. So like I mentioned earlier, we have Jeff Fahey playing a criminal psychologist. Gets into a car accident. Loses his arm. In the waiting room after the accident, his wife is approached by a doctor who says, hey, we can give him a new arm. Science says, let this be possible. So she says, yeah, of course, no brainer. He goes to the operating room. He sees very odd things in there, a bunch of doctors holding shotguns, things like that. And he gets his new arm, goes through rehabilitation, but the arm starts to take on a mind of its own. And he starts to uncover that the arm once belonged to a serial killer. And he's not the only one with parts from the serial killer. There's also other guys. You've got Brad Dourif playing somebody who's got the other arm. He's an artist now whose paintings are now considered to be fantastic, while his work before was rather drab. You also have someone who now has the killer's legs, which is kind of ridiculous because now those legs enable him to do some pretty fat dunks. Pretty silly. And it's kind of a cool idea. It's something that has been done before. However, one of the twists is that someone begins to come back for those limbs. I don't think I'll spoil who, but I will say that the killer looks rad. Body Parts is fairly notable because of a certain scene involving the killer chasing the parts down, handcuffing himself to Jeff Fahey's character, while they're in two separate cars. And so there's this weird parallel car chase that ensues as the killer's trying to get these parts back. Really cool scene. I love that subplot a lot. You know, the killer parts thing has been done before. I think that's what Hands of Orlac is about. Haven't seen it. I know that I should. We have, of course, got Michael Caine's The Hand, which, while not completely the same, is fairly similar-ish with a killer hand. But a film where someone's retrieving the parts that have already been distributed to people to use. I like that idea so much, and it's really cool to see here. Now, I did mention this film is based on a book that's quite a few years old. There's a French novel called Choice Cuts that had been in the Hollywood system for over 20 years, I think, before Body Parts had even been made. One of the people that was attached to it was Alfred Hitchcock, who was planning to do the movie, which would be interesting. I feel like his adaptation, Hitchcock's a legend, so his adaptation probably would have been better than what we've got here. But this film isn't bad by any means. However, it's definitely not the best body horror scene. Like I keep mentioning, I love the idea of this killer coming back for the parts, but that's not a plot that we see until the last third of the film, which is really unfortunate. I would have loved more of that sooner. Maybe give more of that killer's parts away or something. Initially, I think in the book there were 4 or 5 recipients, while here there's only 3. So I would have loved to have seen more of this killer retrieving parts from people as we kind of try to figure out who this killer is. And by the end, I think it's a neat twist because it's something that's unpredictable but makes sense in the world of this film. Some pretty wild body horror imagery occurs here as well, which I definitely like and appreciate, being a body horror enthusiast myself. But one of the sad things is that after release, they had to pull advertisements from this film in Wisconsin because it was right around the time Jeffrey Dahmer was apprehended. And I think, and a lot of people seem to think, that that's part of what sunk this film's trajectory. This film was made on a pretty good budget, it looks like. I mean, when you watch it, there's some pretty wild stunt work happening. There's some crazy car accidents. They shut down a freeway to make that car accident happen, at least part of a freeway that was under construction. But still, I mean, that's a lot of paper. Has a budget of over $10 million, which is something that you still don't really hear about in horror movies, getting budgets that large. It's pretty crazy and impressive. It's a neat story, though. One that I think should probably be remade. I know everyone's anti-remake, but I do see some people with a stance, let's remake movies that need a remake, that maybe weren't so good on release. And I think Body Parts is that. It's not a fantastic film, and it's not a bad film, but it's something that could be so much better because there's so many great ideas there. This film has been referred to as high concept because the idea of people receiving killers' body parts and it going awry is, that I think is one that a lot of people can sort of draw conclusions in their own head of what that movie could look like. Then you add this person who's trying to retrieve those parts, and you definitely have a banger of a film. So I hope one day someone remakes this. I wonder if you would need the choice cuts license or if you could just do the same freaking thing again. I don't know. I don't know how rights work. How close does it have to be to the source? But it's a solid film all around, one that I recommend. I'd even recommend owning this, actually. That's how confident I am. It's a very solid thriller. IMDb says it's a sci-fi horror thriller, I guess, with the futuristic medical angle. But I think it's basically just a horror thriller. There's not that much sci-fi here. And there's a lot of wonderful performance to see as well. Jeff Fahey is someone who I used to love seeing in films. He was also in Lawnmower Man. Brad Dourif, always 10-10, always on point. He is, of course, great here as well. So there's a lot to like about this film. And my only real complaints is that whole third act that should have been pushed closer to the middle. We should have already seen these parts start going awry a little bit earlier instead of building up to that. And then you bring in this wild killer character whose weapon is a shotgun. Now, I feel like if you're a serial killer in a film and you have a weapon that has to be a gun, the only gun of choice is the shotgun. Stand by that. No pistols. But anyways, those are my thoughts on Body Parts. A very, very solid film. If you find this for 10 or less, I would say pick it up. 15, if you're already a fan of this movie, you probably bought it at that price point. But if you're blind buying this, 10 or less, I feel confident in giving this a recommend. Some great scenes, some great chemistry, some really great makeup effects. And it's on that big budget, so they kind of have to be great. Some very impressive stuff here. So, of course, in the comments, let me know what you think. I'm your host, Full Custom Hot Dog. You could follow me on Twitter. It's Full Custom Hot Dog without the last O, because it's just too long for Twitter. So, thank you all for watching, and until next time. If you like what you see,
I love what I see.
Make sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell for notifications so you can watch whatever comes next. And if you like the music you hear, you can follow me on SoundCloud and Spotify. Check the description for links.